They will poke at your peace, pull at your joy, and prey on your light until you do this one sacred thing. Then suddenly they vanish, not because they changed, but because you did. There is a sacred place within you where your joy dances untouched, where your dignity kneels before no one, where your spirit breathes in its full height. That place, child, is not for public use. It is not a revolving door for every wandering soul. It is not a stage for the unhealed to perform on. You must learn, no, you must decide where your soul begins and where the world ends. That line, once drawn, becomes your liberation. Not because it keeps people out, but because it keeps your peace in. You are not here to be everything for everyone. You are not here to explain your softness to the rough, nor your stillness to the chaotic. You are not a therapist to every manipulator. You are not a mirror for people who refuse to see themselves. Drawing that line is not unkind, it is divine. Because when you do not mark your spirit's border, people will stroll into your sanctuary with muddy feet and call it love. They will drain you in the name of closeness and blame you for needing rest. They will rewrite your worth using the ink of their own insecurity and ask you to co-sign the lie. Draw the line and do it with a steady hand. Do it with the same care you would use to protect a sacred flame from the wind. Let that line say, "This is where my peace resides. This is where my purpose is being shaped. This is where my healing is happening." And no, you may not come in if you intend to trample, to tear, to take. You may not enter with judgment in your mouth and jealousy in your hands. You may not taste the fruit of my spirit if you came only to spit seeds. There is no shame in choosing your soul over someone else's comfort. There is no cruelty in turning your back on what repeatedly breaks you. There is no guilt in retreating from people who only come forward when they want something. You can forgive people from across the street. You can wish them well from behind your boundaries. You can love them even without letting them back in. Because drawing that line doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've started caring for yourself first. When you draw that line, you will feel it, not as separation, but as elevation. You will feel lighter, not lonelier, clearer, not colder, stronger, not selfish. That line becomes a vow to yourself, to protect what is holy within, to nurture what is growing, to honor what has already survived so much. And once it is drawn, you must guard it, not with anger, but with knowing, not with force, but with faith, not with loud resistance, but with calm refusal to collapse for anyone who would never bend for you. Your presence, when it is whole and rooted, is a force, not a noise, not a performance, not a desperate grasp for attention, but a quiet, commanding truth. It walks in before you do. It speaks even when your mouth is closed. It shifts the atmosphere because it carries the full weight of everything you've overcome, every lesson you've learned, every piece of dignity you've refused to surrender. And when you walk into a room fully aware of your value, you do not need validation to confirm it. You don't beg to be seen. You are seen because your presence is not borrowed, it is built. But you must also know this: your presence is not owed to everyone. It is not some light to be left on for those who drain you in the dark. It is not a favor to the ungrateful or a gift for the careless. You do not have to show up just because they call your name. You do not have to stay just because they miss your light. Presence is power, yes, but sometimes its greatest power is found in absence. When you withdraw, you are not retreating. You are reclaiming. Reclaiming your energy from the spaces that dishonor it. Reclaiming your voice from the noise that never listened. Reclaiming your breath from the tension that never gave you room to exhale. And you do not need a grand announcement. You do not need an audience. You simply slip away gracefully, quietly, intentionally, because your soul is not a service open for 24-hour access. There are people who will only understand your value when you remove your presence from their convenience. They will feel the silence like a mirror, reflecting every word they never appreciated, every effort they dismissed, every light they tried to dim. And that silence, it speaks louder than any confrontation, any pleading, any attempt to be understood. Your absence becomes the message. Your distance becomes the boundary. Your silence becomes the truth that no argument could carry. There is a power in knowing when to pour and when to pause, when to speak and when to be still, when to give and when to guard, when to show up and when to walk away, not out of bitterness, but out of deep reverence for your own energy. Because not everyone deserves your presence. Not every table deserves your wisdom. Not every situation deserves your time. You are not here to be accessible to what drains you. You are here to be available to what grows you, restores you, and honors your becoming. Withdrawing does not mean you are cold. It means you are clear. Clear about what you will no longer tolerate. Clear about where your spirit will no longer shrink. Clear about the fact that your time, your peace, your essence are not up for negotiation. You are not abandoning anyone. You are returning to yourself. You are not withholding, you are preserving. You are not closing off. You are opening a sacred space within where only what is worthy may dwell. And in that act, in that decision, in that quiet refusal to be pulled in all directions, you remind the world that your presence is not a right. It is a rare and powerful privilege. You don't have to yell to be heard. You don't have to fight to be respected. You don't have to explain your worth to those who've already decided to ignore it. Let your standards speak. Let them rise tall and still, like a sword planted in sacred ground. Because when you begin to live by the quiet power of what you will and will not accept, people begin to understand, some through respect, others through distance, that you are not someone to be mishandled, misused, or misunderstood on repeat. Standards are not walls to keep people out. They are thresholds. They are holy ground markers. They tell others, if you come here, you will come correct. You will come with truth in your mouth and honor in your hands. And those who cannot meet them will not stay. Let them go. Let the ones who stumble at the gates return to the places where they do not have to rise. Because you, child, are not lowering what you've built for people who refuse to climb. People reveal themselves not just in how they treat you, but in how they respond when you demand better. When you lift your standards, you are not asking for too much. You are refusing to live in too little. That shift changes everything. Some will call you difficult, some will call you distant, some will say you've become too proud, but the truth is you've simply stopped bending backward to make others feel taller. You've stopped twisting yourself into smaller shapes just to fit into spaces that never made room for your truth in the first place. There is a stillness that comes when you live by your standards, not because everything is peaceful around you, but because you are finally at peace within you. No longer performing, no longer pleading, no longer over-explaining your no to those who never heard your yes. You simply stand like a mountain unmoved by the storms, like a lighthouse that refuses to dim, and your presence, backed by principle, becomes unshakable. The beautiful thing about standards is that they do the work for you. You don't need to convince people to respect you. Those who are ready will rise to the occasion. You don't need to punish those who fall short. Life has a way of showing them what they forfeited. Your standards, quietly and consistently lived out, cut through the noise. They protect your time. They guard your peace. They filter your company. And most of all, they remind you moment by moment that you are worthy. Not someday, not if you're perfect, but now. Let them talk. Let them question. Let them walk away. Because when you live by your standards, you don't need the crowd. You need your crown, the invisible one, the one shaped by self-worth, polished by pain, and held up by resilience. And when that crown rests firm upon your spirit, you no longer bow for anything that does not honor the royalty in your soul. There comes a moment in your becoming when silence tastes sweeter than debate, when peace becomes more valuable than the performance of being understood, when your soul no longer flinches at the sound of chaos because it has learned to walk away from anything that demands its dignity as a payment. That moment, that holy shift, is the birth of disengagement, not out of apathy, not out of fear, but out of the deep knowing that not every battle is yours to fight, not every fire deserves your breath, not every opinion deserves your energy. Disengagement is not weakness. It is wisdom dressed in grace. To disengage is to honor your boundaries without shouting them. It is to exit the stage without slamming the door. It is to refuse the invitation to the drama, the dysfunction, the disorder that once tempted you to prove your worth through reaction. You no longer flail to be heard. You no longer contort yourself to make someone else feel taller. You simply release, not out of arrogance, but from a soul that has finally remembered it is not a vessel for everyone else's chaos to be poured into. You see, only the free can walk away. Only the free can choose stillness when provoked. Only the free can let others talk and not be moved. Because freedom is not loud, it's rooted. It doesn't argue for its right to be respected. It lives in a way that makes disrespect impossible to sustain. The truly free don't need to clap back. They just don't sit at tables where clapping is required to prove they belong. They don't chase apologies. They don't collect explanations. They don't hold meetings with people who are committed to misunderstanding them. Disengagement is their fluency because they finally learned the dialect of peace. When you disengage, you are not disappearing. You are prioritizing. You are not being passive. You are being selective. You are not shutting down. You are tuning in to the deep, sacred rhythm of your own spirit. You are no longer tangled in proving, fixing, or performing. You are choosing your energy like you choose your breath, mindfully, intentionally, without apology. And that choice builds a kind of quiet power, a holy resilience that needs no defense. There will be people who call you distant when you no longer carry what they dropped in your hands. There will be voices who label your stillness as cold, who call your peace indifference. Let them speak. Let them circle the mountain you've already left behind. Your job is not to make them comfortable with your growth. Your job is to walk in alignment with your spirit and to guard the gates of your peace like a sanctuary too sacred to be trampled. Disengagement, when practiced with wisdom, becomes a sacred language, a soft no, a quiet exit, a shift in posture that says, I don't live there anymore. It is the embodiment of discernment. It is the answer that requires no explanation. And when you speak it fluently, you stop allowing the noise to write your story. You return to your center, not because the world made space for it, but because you did. Because you realize that being pulled into every storm is not a reflection of strength, but a forgetting of your own sky. There is a lesson far more powerful than words, more unforgettable than arguments, and more clarifying than any explanation. It is the lesson taught in absence. It is the revelation found not in what you say, but in where you no longer stand. When someone grows used to the rhythm of your giving, your listening, your showing up despite the ache, they come to mistake your grace for obligation. And that is when presence becomes unappreciated, when kindness is confused for weakness, when tolerance becomes the soil where disrespect grows roots. But the moment you remove your energy from the room, the moment your voice no longer fills their silence, they begin to taste the hollow of everything they once ignored. You don't need to argue about how much you gave. You don't need to list the times you stayed when it was hard. You don't need to justify your boundaries to those who never respected them when you were soft. Just go. Go in the quiet of your own liberation. Go with the calm of someone who has nothing left to prove. Let your absence echo in the places where your presence was taken for granted. Let it ring like a bell in the minds of those who thought your love would never run dry. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining yourself and simply walk away. Not with bitterness, not with rage, just with clarity. And in that silence, in that withdrawal, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. They begin to feel the weight of your absence, an absence that reveals what your presence used to carry without complaint. It is there, in that empty space, that they come face to face with everything you endured quietly, everything you accepted, hoping they would see, everything you allowed while hoping they would grow. Presence is often invisible when it's consistent. It becomes background noise, expected, assumed. But absence is loud. Absence is a mirror. Absence is a teacher that does not raise its voice, does not seek revenge, does not negotiate. It simply removes itself, and in doing so, holds a light to the void left behind. That void becomes the curriculum. That space becomes the consequence. And in that void, they either evolve or repeat the same story with someone else until life teaches them in harsher ways what you once bore in silence. Your value doesn't need defending when you have the strength to disengage. You no longer wait for them to realize it. You create the conditions for realization by removing access. You do not beg to be treated better. You vanish from the places that could not hold you well. You do not try to fix what refuses to rise. You rise alone. And in that rising, you teach them what they never learned while you were busy shrinking, smoothing things over, making excuses for behavior that never should have reached your door. Teach them with absence, with the empty seat at the table, with the phone that no longer rings, with the peace you found once you stopped explaining your worth to those who treated it like an option. And watch how silence becomes the loudest sermon, how distance becomes the deepest